RCMP officers received a call about 2 missing children in Lansdowne Station. The information at the time was that they wandered off away from the property, and I can tell you that our officers got at the scene very quickly, and we were monitoring the situation and hopefully finding the children very soon after that.
So it's very quickly. Officers arrive, and then what? You expected, it sounds like you're saying, that you'd find the children quickly, or hoped you would anyways. That didn't happen.
So Kayla, what I can tell you, from experience, you look at missing children. I've been involved with a handful of cases since I've been with Strategic Communications. Most oftentimes, the children are located very quickly after officers arrive at the scene, right? And that's our hope every single time, that they wandered off and you can find the children. Because I'm sure, like every officer out there, I'm not on the road currently, but your heart is pounding, the adrenaline is rushing, you're trying to find those children, right?
This case started just like that?
That's
what you're
correct.
Describing, you thought you'd go there, find them very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And our officers were nearby in an ongoing search for a kayaker that had gone missing the day prior. I can tell you I was monitoring the situation remotely, and our officers, I could tell they were getting there as quickly as possible.
There are some, as you are aware, many theories out there. Some people think, well, maybe it's really just a tragic accident. Maybe they just wandered off into the woods. But you've said that it's suspicious. So at the very least, why does the RCMP view this case as suspicious?
So every missing persons investigation is suspicious until it's proven that it's not. If we don't have that information to say that it's not suspicious, we have to continue to assume that it is suspicious and access those resources and tools and follow up those tips and find that evidence until we find the people that are missing.
So you don't think they were abducted, but you can't find them. How do 2 young children just vanish?
That's a great question, Kayla, and we are asking for the public for tips and information. And to date, we've received close to 500 tips, so we have to follow up on those tips, right? Whether it's a tip that indicates that there could be something that happened elsewhere in the province, elsewhere in the country, we have to follow up on those investigative tips to rule them out. And to this date, we haven't had any confirmed sightings.
But there have been tips that lead you to other parts of the country that you had to check.
As with any investigation, oftentimes we do get tips that you have to verify that are elsewhere, yes.
You have said that the children were last seen alive the day before. Can you tell me about the nature of that?
So we know they were seen in public.
We're Lily and Jack.
With loved ones the day prior.
If you want to keep following every verified update on this case and help hold the spotlight on these 2 children, hit subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. Every new viewer helps keep pressure on the search for answers. On the morning of May 2nd, the family home on Gairloch Road in Lansdowne Station became the center of a frantic response. 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack were reported missing. Within an hour, search teams and RCMP were combing the property and the thick woods that surround it. The first impression for many was the scale of the effort. Helicopters, drones, dogs, volunteers, and officers working long into the night. But the second, more wrenching feeling was how little investigators initially had to go on. No broken windows, no forced entry, no sign of violent struggle at the trailer. 2 small children had simply vanished from a yard that, on paper, should have offered the kind of visibility that helps in searches. That absence of obvious physical evidence changed the shape of the inquiry from the outset. When a disappearance happens without clear, immediate traces, the investigation must move both swiftly and carefully, combing every inch of terrain while also building a digital, documentary, and witness-based timeline to find a narrow window when the unknown occurred. Early on, RCMP officers and search and rescue teams treated the most immediate possibility that the children had wandered off into the surrounding woods, with urgency because the landscape there can swallow clues quickly. Nova Scotia's forest can be dense and deceptive. A fallen tree, a culvert, a steep ravine, or a watery ditch can hide a small child almost instantly. That's why the initial days of any missing child search are so intense. In the Sullivan case, hundreds of volunteers and dozens of trained searchers walked grid patterns through difficult terrain. Dogs followed scent lanes, drones scanned canopies, and helicopters provided overhead sweeps. Even with that force of people and technology, though, no obvious trace of Lily or Jack was recovered near the home that pointed to a straightforward wandering scenario. In other words, the first assumption, however reasonable given the rural setting, did not produce the hope for evidence, and the investigation had to widen and deepen quickly. Investigators are careful about language. They emphasize that every missing child case is treated as suspicious until proven otherwise. That is not the same as saying criminality is assumed. Rather, it reflects the reality that when a child cannot be found, there are multiple dangerous possibilities, and the early hours determine whether leads go cold. The RCMP publicly framed the inquiry under the Missing Persons Act and made clear it was exploring all scenarios. In practice, that means parallel tracks of work, wide area physical searches to cover the most likely nearby ground, and a rapid digital documentary push to establish objective timelines. Police teams pulled call logs, GPS metadata, banking records, and surveillance footage to cross-check statements and witness accounts. They sought judicial permissions to access devices and records, the painstaking legal steps that let investigators align time-stamped data with human recollection. Those steps are critical because, in high-stakes cases, memory is unreliable, but a cell tower ping or a security camera timestamp does not lie. The investigators' posture was to be comprehensive, to leave no possible lead untested, and to use the signs available to them to either confirm or rule out lines of inquiry. The public responded with urgency and, in many ways, generosity. Nearly 500 tips flowed in from people across the region and beyond. Some tips stretched the investigation's focus outside Nova Scotia, as witnesses suggested possible travel routes or sightings. Those tips are both a blessing and a logistics problem. In a major case, authorities must sort, prioritize, and verify enormous quantities of information. The RCMP reported receiving hundreds of tips and thousands of video files, and they have been triaging that material to find what is credible and actionable. Each tip requires follow-up calls, cross-check it with other evidence, and sometimes fresh fieldwork. That process takes time, and the public rightfully grows anxious during the wait. But thoroughness matters. A false lead can squander precious resources and slow down a case. Conversely, a tip ignored too quickly might be the one that breaks things open. The failure to issue an Amber Alert in the first days was another issue that raised questions in the community. Amber Alerts have clear legal and procedural criteria. Authorities must believe an abduction has occurred, and that there's enough information, suspect description, vehicle, or route, to broadcast a rapid public warning that could lead to immediate community action. In this case, investigators said the early evidence did not meet those strict thresholds. That decision did not mean police were uninterested or inactive. It meant that a specific legal standard for a major public broadcast was not satisfied. For many people watching, that felt like a missed opportunity, and it sparked debate. But it is worth understanding that Amber Alerts are designed to be blunt instruments for very specific circumstances. Launching one without a clear suspect or route can dilute the system and create false alarms. Still, the absence of an alert made residents feel vulnerable and raised difficult questions about how best to use public notice systems when the facts are still murky. As the weeks passed, the RCMP publicly acknowledged that some early assumptions may have limited the initial search focus. That admission is rare and important. Investigators said they recalibrated, expanding search areas to include rail lines, utility corridors, and other routes that had not initially been swept as thoroughly. Investigative work in missing person cases often evolves this way. You start with the most likely nearby places. If those searches don't turn up evidence, investigators widen their net or revisit areas with fresh eyes and new data. Rail lines and utility corridors are logical next places. They are linear routes out an area that may not be well covered by early grid sweeps, and they can hide discarded items or traces. By acknowledging the need to expand, police signal a shift from a strictly local search to a broader geographic effort. and that in turn can raise hopes for new leads while also underscoring how easily a critical trace can slip past the earliest sweeps. Forensics have been another axis of the investigation. Items recovered, notably fragments of a pink blanket that family members identified as belonging to Lily, and a child-sized boot print on a pipeline trail, have been forwarded for laboratory work. The forensic testing is multi-layered. DNA phenotyping might be used in some cases to suggest physical characteristics from biological traces. Soil analysis can link tiny particles on clothing or objects to specific locations, and detailed lab review can search for fibers, fingerprints, or other minute clues that connect an item to a person or place. Forensic work is slow because it must be methodical and defensible. Labs are careful to avoid contamination and to document every step, so results can stand up in court if needed. In many investigations, a single forensic match can reframe months of work. In others, tests return inconclusive or partial results that still require interpretation against other evidence. The investigators made clear they are pursuing these routes while also acknowledging the practical limits. Not every item yields clear DNA. Not every footprint matches a known shoe, and environmental conditions can degrade evidence quickly. Community volunteers have played an enormous role, bringing energy and resources that official agencies cannot always sustain on their own. Local people organized searches, coordinated drone flights, worked with K-9 units, and used shared GIS mapping to ensure teams didn't duplicate efforts. That kind of grassroots cooperation matters in a rural region, where neighbors know the backroads, hidden trails, and seasonal routes. Volunteers also bring local knowledge. A shortcut no one else thought to check, a neglected creek that flows into a larger waterway, or a shed where someone stores old equipment. Those small observations can be crucial, but volunteer efforts must be managed carefully to preserve potential evidence. Investigators often ask groups to work with official search coordinators so that searches are systematic and forensic integrity is maintained. Behind the scenes, multiple RCMP units and partner agencies have been collaborating on the case. Major crime, digital forensics, K-9 units, forensics labs, and local detachments have been involved, and more than 11 distinct RCMP teams or units were reported to be contributing their expertise. Complex investigations frequently require cross-disciplinary cooperation. Digital forensics to decode device metadata, major crime units to coordinate interviews and legal steps, K-9 handlers for scent work, forensic teams for lab analysis, and specialized search teams for field work. That collaboration is resource-intensive, and it requires careful command and control at a central coordination post, so leads are tracked, evidence is preserved, and investigative tasks are delegated effectively. It also means that local RCMP are supported by provincial and national assets where necessary, helping broaden the pool of tools available to find Lily and Jack. Through all this, the family has remained engaged and cooperative with investigators. Public statements from relatives and family advocates emphasize that cooperation. They urge anyone with information come forward and to direct tips to official RCMP channels. For a family under immense strain, managing grief while assisting a major investigation is nearly impossible. Nonetheless, their appeal for public help has been steady. The family's openness to sharing details, while also guarding their privacy when needed, reflect a painful reality. The primary goal is to find the children, and cooperation with authorities is the clearest path to that outcome. There are lessons here for anyone following the case. First, the lack of a single shocking piece of evidence does not mean the investigation is inactive or indifferent. It often means detectives are working methodically, checking data against timelines and cross-referencing details, so that any lead they pursue has a high chance of yielding definitive results. Second, public help matters. Not as rumor-filled speculation, but as concrete, verifiable information. Dash cam clips with timestamps, original camera files rather than compressed uploads, and direct eyewitness accounts with specifics about time and place. Third, community support is essential, but it must be channeled responsibly. Activists and volunteers do vital work when they coordinate with official search teams. In practical terms, the investigator's repeated public message is straightforward. If you saw a vehicle or person near Gairloch Road or in the surrounding back roads between May 1st and May 3rd, if your dash cam captured anything, or if you have any footage or memory that can help establish a timeline, contact the RCMP through their official tip lines. Tips can be made anonymously through Crime Stoppers if fear or other concerns prevent direct contact. The reward that has been put forward by provincial programs for major unsolved cases, up to $150,000 in some instances, remains a lever to encourage people who might otherwise stay silent to come forward. What does the future look like in a case like this? Investigators will continue to broaden and refine searches, follow forensic leads, and prioritize video and tip analysis. They will reassess earlier assumptions and revisit areas with new information. They will continue cross-checking device data, bank logs, and CCTV footage to compress the timeline of what happened between the children's last confirmed sighting and the 9/11 report. And, crucially, they will keep asking the public for anything that might multiply the chance of recovery. Each small, verified piece of information can shift an investigation dramatically. For viewers, the takeaway is this: keep paying attention, but do it in a way that helps. Share verified updates from credible sources, not rumor. Preserve any footage you might have and hand it to investigators with the original metadata. Support the family in humane ways. And remember that in missing child cases, patience and persistence are as important as speed and outrage. The RCMP and volunteer searchers are still working. The forensic labs are still testing, and the community remains ready to help when a critical detail surfaces. Bring the light back to this story by sharing verified information and by staying tuned for updates. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and check official channels for confirmed news. Lily and Jack's disappearance is still unresolved, and every careful lead matters. Keep watching, keep looking, and if you have anything that could help, pass it to the RCMP right away.